Flagman Fun. Flagman Fun. Funny story about this one. I really like playing this. It's one of my favorite songs on guitar to play. This is pretty much a finished one. And if I had to think of one that I would market, this is one that maybe I could throw on iTunes and make some money off of. I don't know how much, but it's catchy and it's fun. And there's a really cool conceit in this one, a clever part of the song where I go through all of the folk music. I like folk music, always trying to contextualize stuff. I don't just like Bob Dylan. I try to see where he came from. I liked Arlo Guthrie, Woody Guthrie. With the internet age being an internet generation, we're able to like know the generation before us. Well, being the Oregon Trail generation, being that generation which bridged the internet. We didn't really have it in high school. It just came out, but now we have it as an adults. So I remember elementary school and middle school not having the internet, then high school having the internet just come out, and pretty much like George Bush was elected 2000. So we saw how it was starting to affect politics. And I think after 20 years, top-down hierarchies are definitely trying to put a stranglehold on this. But we saw the early one. Um, they also called them September Childs, I think, the ones who there was an influx of new people on the internet every fall as people came into. I read this somewhere online. If you look up internet history in some of these forums, every fall you'd have people going to universities and they'd begin online for the first time, leaving their parents' house or getting like decent Wi-Fi for the first time or decent bandwidth from the universities. So every September you'd have this influx of naivety into the forums and into these discussions. And so people noticed this September rush of idiocy. And now we don't have such a seasonal rush because people have so much internet at homes, even though our country is lagging far behind other industrialized countries as far as internet, but that just shows you our values. Our empire is undermining our quality of life, blah, blah, blah. But why did I bring that up? Oh, yeah, so I'm able to, when I was young, look up deeper culture than previous generations. So you not only listen to Bob Dylan, I got to listen to Woody Guthrie. I think that is the long tail is what defines the internet generation. That also affects our morality and our ethics, is the reason why people care so much about truth and context in the internet age is because there's no excuse. You don't have to be an expert in order to quickly contextualize the subject, just a little bit of Googling until our Googling paths and our internet starts becoming more and more strangled. But you can still pretty much find information on the internet at will. So our generation is able to contextualize truth like never before, or culture. So Flagman Fun, I was able to put some of the cool guys from folk history, and then I go all the way through. Who do? I do Arlo Guthrie. I do Bob Dylan. I do Phil Ochs. I do Bob Marley. I do Rage Against the Machine. And then I have a silly verse at the end. I should really play this on guitar, but I only have a nylon string guitar here, and this is really more of a strumming song. It needs a steel string. But it's Flagman Fun. It goes, ain't no running from the Flagman Fun. You in with your penny or you in with your gun. The Flagman catch you even if you try to run. He tag you with a penny, tag you with a gun. Uh-huh, uh-huh, uh-huh. Went down yonder the wishing hole, looking for a get of that wood he stole. A mile long tail and scheduled gold, and found me a sail on a fishing pole. Uh-huh, uh-huh. Financed on the credit. Uh-huh. Left my job with a Maggie farm and stoned as a rock in a Buddhist garden. Ain't nobody gonna beg my pardon, digging my break underneath the yard. Uh-huh, uh-huh. And she breaks just like a woman. Uh-huh. 31 on 17, ain't nobody get the best of me. Born and raised, land of the free, lost my faith in the enemies. Uh-huh, uh-huh. Universal soldier. Uh-huh. Pirate eye, Robin Hood, rob you blind for the greater good. Keep you scared, atomic bomb, lost the words to redemption songs. Uh-huh, uh-huh. And none of them can stop at the time. Uh-huh. Start the rally, don't be late now. Watch the bulls out on parade. Shout, yes we can, might as well. They're round them up with a pocket full of shells. Uh-huh, Uh-huh. 'Cause you do what they tell you. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. SSN, the tax ID, the NSA knows it best for me. Occupy, JOB, USA, INC. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. And like I sign off with my social security number. I don't know why I did that. 572694267, the number on my arm. I guess some of the poems I write, poems I write for some of the poems I write just really for myself to remind myself of what I believe at the time. I believe my mom went to one of her many relatives were dying. She's the youngest of 10, so one of her siblings were dying. She went to Mexico. I was in her office watching The Office, not really selling much insurance. This was, I was a little bit over my reading phase and I was in my art creation phase. And so I was sitting around my office. My friend was there. We bumming around. I'm smoking a lot of weed. Had my guitar. People would come in, maybe like a couple of people a day to make payments. I wasn't doing any sales calls. I was already checked out on my way to my next adventure. So I had my guitar in the back office, feeling like this is also just being a little bit of a brat, feeling like, all right, I'm the boss now. Don't gotta work. Fuck it. Fuck money. We don't need money. Once you That's a little bit of a dangerous thing I've noticed. There's so much hypocrisy and cynicism in the world. When you read the actual historic narrative, it gives you an excuse to be a bit of an asshole. You're like, well, fucking the United States is such a hypocritical piece of shit. Then fuck everything. Fuck institutions, fuck leaders, fuck teachers, fuck these jobs. It's kind of a dangerous place to be because you're don't have any correction. We do need older generations to lead us and guide us. But when you lose your faith in institutions and lose your faith in the old authorities, you're like this little free radical, like I said. And I'm not a violent free radical, but I'm a little bit of I could still be an annoying free radical. So when I read so much about what's going on in the Iraq war, it really takes the wind out of my sails of wanting to be a good little salesperson. It takes my respect for my parents go way down because they were like, I was like, these wars are unjust. And they're like, oh, well, they're Muslims. Well, American empire is good for, they don't say empire, but they say war is good for the economy. It's like that level of cynicism. I'm like, you guys are my parents and I love you, but like, y'all are bad human beings. And so I'm not going to support your business or help you make money. It's like, I'm just here just until I could fucking figure out my next step. But for my moral development, this is a toxic environment. And I have more compassion for people who disagree with me now. I think there needs to be more education, and you don't educate people. They're the victims of propaganda and narrow belief systems. I'm more just like those soldiers. I'm more interested in where these ideas are coming from and where this culture is coming from. Then if you present options to the people and they still choose to believe in bullshit, that's one thing. But we don't even have options. Like they've told me before, what I'm not. My dad, when I told him, "You're really gonna vote for Trump?" This guy is a misogynist. Like you can tell as one man to another that he doesn't respect women. Like I know you buy into his persona, but still, come on, instinctually, this isn't a guy you would want to leave women you care about around. He reeks of a creep. And then I mentioned a couple of creeps that we've known in our life. Like this isn't a guy you would want me to model my behavior on. That's not how you've acted, at least not in your best of times. This isn't a gentleman or a scholar. This isn't He's not chivalrous. Forget that he might be a borderline rapist creep, but he's definitely not a chivalrous man. He's a dick to women on face value. But anyways, that's enough about him. But my dad says, "Who do you want me to vote for? You want me to vote for Hillary? I can't do that." That's what it comes down to. So I feel like present these guys options and they will start to divorce themselves from the cancer that they feel. And then a lot of it, if you understand the psychology and the motivation behind voting, is that you increase anxiety and these emotional triggers and people act against their own self-interest. We've known this for a while. That's what advertising, the science of advertising, is all about. Undermining people's self-esteem and confidence so they feel like they need to buy useless shit. So a shampoo commercial scares you by dandruff. Most advertising is done through attacking the audience's self-esteem through feelings of inferiority, right? And then now they buy out of an emotional weakness. So political advertising's been doing the same way, so I don't blame him so much. But during this time in my life when I was writing this, that's how I justify, I guess, me not buying so much, because right now I care a little bit about money. Doing these things so I can prepare for a book proposal, so I can secure a decent advance, so I can help secure my financial footing, but in a way that I feel is more aligned with my values. That's also why I was working hard in real estate to help my folks out. I was really proud I was able to pick up the car payment. Haven't quite been able to pick up the mortgage yet, so they're still renting. It'd be nice to put them in a house and put us back on financial footing. So most of my financial decisions in life are made with an eye towards my family. I don't care as much about money. If I had my way and I was an orphan, I probably would be living in the Caribbean in a shack, getting most of my food for free out of the ocean and communing with nature. Because I feel like spiritually, that's where you find the most wisdom, when you're tied more into a holistic natural process. But it's one of the reasons why I put this number on my arm. I'm Spartacus fighting my way out of empire from the inside out. And sometimes you have to do it from the gladiator pit, so be it. I have an aptitude for the capitalistic fight, so part of my identity is deriving pleasure from confrontation. So if that's my personality, then it's well suited for this struggle. Back then, I was still kind of shirking responsibility. So I just remember that because it's such an interesting place to come up with. This song not only is a really cool song that I like, but just how I came up with it. Just sitting in that insurance agency, smoking weed and strumming on guitar. And this is how art is created. And then flagman fun. What does it mean? I love this chorus. I don't think I'll coin a phrase better than this chorus. Because this is how empire gets you, right? Ain't no running from the flagman fun. Either in with a penny or you're in with a gun. They either get you economically or they get you with physical violence. Through our empire, that's how empire does it. The World Bank. The story of the World Bank is economic violence. Flagman catch you even if you try to run. He either tags you with a penny, he either checkmates you through, what were we doing with Venezuela? Tag you with a penny or he'll tag you with a gun. Venezuela's an interesting one because Hugo Chavez exceeded his ability by valuing their economy through oil. We thought we had reached peak oil and the price of oil was going to stay high forever. It was like over $120 a barrel, at least over 100. And so he started valuing his tar sands, just like the dirty oil in Canada, the oil that's stuck in the sand, in the tar. It takes a lot of energy to get that oil out, so it's only valuable when oil is very expensive. But once oil drops like below $80 a barrel or $60 a barrel, that oil in the sands is no longer valuable. So it's almost like you lose those deposits, because until the oil gets expensive enough, it's not financially feasible to get it out. Venezuela, I read about when Hugo Chavez was in power, was claiming that they had more oil than the Middle East because they had so much deposits in the sand. But then the bottom fell out of the market. And it fell out of the market because the OPEC decided to buy back market share by increasing their production, which drops the prices, supply and demand. So more supply. And I think that's how that works. Either way, they flood the market with a lot more oil. They basically, the economy, we talk about free markets and this and that, but in order for, if you believe in markets, which whether you believe in capitalism or socialism or this and that, markets have laws like laws of gravity. They operate in certain ways. So we talk about respecting free markets and capitalism, but there's these captured markets. We don't operate by market principles, and that's because the resources are manipulated to such an extent that the prices are manipulated. I believe universities are such markets, so university costs aren't operating by supply and demand because we've manipulated those markets by guaranteeing student loans to everyone, basically signature loans. Once you increase the moral hazard, I'm evidence. I didn't have to justify the money I borrowed from the government, and I didn't intend to pay it back at that time. I've since become a responsible adult. I don't pay my debts now because I'm in this artistic journey, but I plan on catching everything up. I have confidence in myself. I've done it once before. But back then I was like, fuck this. This is when you don't believe in society, this is the danger of free radicals. When the underpinnings of what's supposed to be civilization are exposed as fraudulent, then people just, the cynicism, the moral hazard goes up in society. And I think you see corruption everywhere. You see torture in the military because it's condoned from the top down. You see malfeasance in our financial sectors because it's condoned from the top down. The leaders of our governing institutions have a responsibility of keeping the moral fiber of our country correct. When you have immoral leaders, I think you have an excuse for more immoral actors to come out of the woodwork. And that's another reason for us to reform our political institutions, right? To try to make it a qualification for candidacy of our higher offices, moral character. We've kind of given up on that. We've just consigned politics to be an immoral place. It doesn't have to be that way. We might have, with modern technology, the ability to actually check the moral character of our leaders and hold people accountable. It's going to begin with an audit, and that's how I plan on beginning it. Having a new political party and then having structures in place to audit institutions to reintroduce morality into our political discussion. So this is a complex discussion, but I think that has a part of it. Back then, I didn't believe in that. I believed in this, and I bought back into society by checking myself. That's what the idea of being honest and sincerity. Honesty and sincerity correct you towards the truth. So after Occupy Wall Street, I think I was a little bit superstitious. I was a little bit superstitious with money. If I read my writing, which we're going to get to, that would be my fault then, is that I was still immature. I'm immature still. You'll never stop being immature, I'm sure, because there's always ways that you can mature and be more responsible. But I'm less immature about money and less immature about romance, having indulged myself in both recently. So having had good relationships, not just one, but multiple women of character who've loved me and shown me that I have worth as a romantic partner, makes me less insecure of finding that in the future. And the same way, making $500,000 in real estate, in something that I love real estate? I do love homes and I do love people. But that's not my calling. So that's interesting. I do love real estate, and when I'm back on top financially, it's a really good place to put your money and make it grow. And it's really cool that I have that skill set now. And watching more market cycles, watching once we enter a down cycle and then watching us come out of it, I'll be able to test some of my ideas for my belief in how to become what do you call it when someone's wise in a field? Lethological, that state of lethological. Expert. How to become an expert in an industry, I think, requires watching one, maybe multiple cycles so you can test out your, not just what other people have told you, but your own unique ideas about market cycles and how the market reacts to it. But so real estate is interesting, but this, I think, coining a phrase is actually my passion and my gift. Maybe not even writing per se. We'll see if I can actually. I would like to finish a form, like finish a book, and then have the audience tell me if there's a reception for it. But regardless of whether I could finish a book, I know I could finish a poem. And that's because language and phrasing is what my gift is when it comes down to it. Now, a short story and a poem, that's just a matter of endurance. And like that's what that one good creative writing teacher I had in school would tell us. Some people are short storyists, some people are novelists. It's a matter of endurance. Some people are sprinters or marathon runners. But I got good legs. I really like this phrasing. Ain't no running from the flagman fun, either in with a penny or you in with a gun. Flagman catch you even if you try to run, either tag you with a penny or I'll tag you with a gun. It sounds so cool, just a little dang 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 dang. Went down yonder the wishing hole looking for the gator that Woody stole. Woody Guthrie has a song about going down to a fishing hole and fishing, and it's just a bunch of imagery after imagery. It's this really cool, like folksy, drawn on an American music tradition. There's this American music tradition that comes out of like Appalachia and out of the bluegrass people of just finger picking, playing fast and free on the guitar that he represented, coming down from the mountains. That's who Bob Dylan was emulating, who Dylan was. Bob Dylan was a suburban Jewish kid, I believe. But he wanted to be like Ramblin' Jack and Woody Guthrie and these guys who came out of the country. I think Woody Guthrie was a real thing. Strumming their guitars and just funny phrases and funny images. And that's how you understand Bob, by understanding who he was emulating. Mile Long Tail and the Scales Were Golden, those are descriptions from the Woody song. Found Me a Sail on the Fishing Pole is also a line from his song. And then I have in between the verses these little lines that I would try to, if I was going to perform this, imitate in their voice. Financed on the credit. That's a phrase out of his song. So the conceit of this song is that every verse should have phrases from the person I'm talking about, and then a ending line in their style. That's the epitome of their style, like a famous line. So, left my job with a Maggie farming, stoned as a rock in a Buddhist garden. Ain't nobody gonna beg my pardon, digging my break underneath the yard. It's really fun to sing this because it just kind of bounces off the way it rhymes and everything off your tongue. But Maggie's farm is in the first line. Everybody must get stoned is in the second line. Ain't nobody gonna beg my pardon. I think that's the I see my light come shining from the west down to the east. Any day now, I shall be released. So that's that song about it. And then digging my break underneath the yard. I guess that's just the imagery from there too. And then that leads into breaks just like a woman, which is a famous Dylan line and title of a song. Now we have Phil Ochs, who has the Universal Soldier. So this is more just about the theme of that. 31 or I'm 17, ain't nobody got the best of me. Born and raised, land of the free, lost my faith in my enemies. So there's still the theme to the whole song, which is all of these folk music tradition. And then we go into Bob Dylan we go into Rage Against the Machine and Bob Marley, but that's for myself. I am tying a thread through the cultural narrative of anti-authoritarian art. We don't have many of those. We call it counterculture, we call it folk music and this and that, but what is similar to Bob Marley, Rage Against the Machine, Phil Ochs, Woody Guthrie? All of them were challenging authority in the name of humanity. And I guess that's where I see myself as, and that's why I joke around with my folks. I'm like, when I was in the military, I was a linguist. And Pops went to school for linguistics. Something in our brain, genetically, and for myself, if I look at the narrative of my life, like when you talk about intersex, could teach us about being both man and a woman. Let's elevate these people as the translators they are, but let's not let them take too much of the spotlight because it could confuse the rest of us when we also need room in order to figure out our own identities who aren't intersex but happen to be more homogenous. Because we're the majority. Majority rules, minority rights. We're not excluding the minority, but that can be used as manipulation when the exception proves the rule. There's a rule for a certain reason. Nature does usually break down into a dichotomy of sexes. So let's not ignore that or we'll confuse the science of nature itself. So the same way I'm a interrace, I lie at the intersection of a lot of stuff. And in sociology and anthropology, I think that's becoming more prominent. That might be a way out of our current malaise, is understanding that these intersections of identity are going to help us translate and help us not ignore, because if I care about the narratives which have been excluded, I can't just say identity politics is stupid. It has its place, but I believe it's being manipulated like politics is wont to do. Politics finds the granular, the victim that then they can elevate to the forefront to manipulate, to justify their own. That's one of my poems I wrote this year, is the devil writes himself in, what is it? The devil he said, I'll wrap myself in virtue and infect the will of every man, so you'll never be alone. So I think that's malicious intentions wraps itself in virtue, and so they find a victim that they then can blanket themselves in. And I see this in the prosecution of empire as well, or the continuation of empire. We find the Kurds in northern Iraq that weekend. We don't give a fuck about them. We've abandoned them so many times, but they're very convenient when we need to go into Syria. Now we can say the Syrians are prosecuting the Kurds. Or Benghazi, the crime that Hillary did in Benghazi wasn't that. I mean, there was funny stuff that happened with that raid on that CIA headquarters, but it was that we were supposedly there to protect the people in Benghazi from Libyan genocide, but that was our excuse for overthrowing Gaddafi, which is to destabilize the whole region. So we always find victims somewhere to whitewash our atrocities. So, but this is my way of going and reclaiming that. Well, how does that relate to this? Well, narratives. Finding the people who challenged authority in our musical canon now, and untying this. I guess so. I mentioned myself as the thread, stitching myself through music, through art, through drawing, through poetry, through writing. I feel like I have some plays or I have some novels in me, and I want to stitch myself through the cultural narrative and find the disaffected, the counterculture, the others, and help create a real opposition culture. Not even that, because you don't want to do identity through opposition. Help create a human culture, which then we can attract other disaffected people so they don't act violent, and give people a home who don't feel like they have a place in the dominant culture. That's all. If we identify ourselves as counterculture, then that sells ourselves short. Right now, we don't have real human culture. So let's start connecting the threads of these different supposed countercultures, recognize humanity in them, and help create this larger human culture out of that. And then that follows the wisdom of when you point at evil, you become evil. Because your judgment, your negativity is just going to increase the cycle of violence. That's not really Buddhist Zen. That's not the inherent wisdom I've always lived by. So instead of giving or feeding into negativity, let's concentrate on our side and wrapping ourselves in humanity and just growing this space that we have, which now ties into my identity sexually about what the role of a man is to create space for the female energy to create within that space, gestate within that space. If you talk to anyone who's dealt with politics or organizational structures, when the females leave, that's when when the violence goes up, the females leave. So it's a good sign when you and that's what Howard Zinn said, the war against, in the modern age, is against women and children, against the most vulnerable among us. So if you have a healthy ecosystem, a sign of that is a thriving female culture, and a sign of its degradation. In Occupy Wall Street, someone told me that they're like, it went to shit when all the yoga girls left. Because at the beginning of Occupy Wall Street, we had a lot of pretty girls in spandex doing yoga in the mornings. And you don't have to be a creep just to appreciate female energy around you. You got to do yoga around the girls, and there's a good vibe. We're happy. But once it became unsafe for them, then it was just a bunch of angry dudes. And that was the beginning of the end, right? So it's like butterflies. Beautiful things around show you that you're doing something right. A lot of negativity and violence and stuff show you that you're doing something wrong. Left my job with the Maggie Farm, and ain't nobody get the best of me. Universal Soldier. Here's the Bob Marley one. Pirate Eye, Robin Hood, rob you blind for the greater good. Keep you scared, Atomic Bomb, lost their words to Redemption song. I wasn't just trying to include their words just as the conceit, the clever part, but I was also trying to include their wisdom. So the stitch weaving itself through the narratives is one of humanity. So like, what was the wisdom of Bob Marley? It was, don't be scared. It was what's his name? Fela, that famous African musician, said, and I have him on one of my recordings, the first thing in life you've got to understand is to have no fear. Or he says, the first thing in life is to have no fear. We've got to understand this. The man lived a fearless life. The greatest fruits in life, the greatest loves, the greatest actions come when you can't ignore, you can't ignore fear. You don't want to be naive. So fear is an emotion which comes, but emotions come like weather. You observe them. That's why I like the Zenist philosophy. It happens. Weather comes over, it washes over you, but when you have to do what you have to do, you have to do what you have to do. Don't let people hold you emotionally hostage through this Cold War tactic of constant nuclear winter. That's what Bob Marley counteracted with his philosophy of love, is that none of them kind of stop at the time. It's like everything will pass, even nuclear winter. Don't let people hold you emotionally hostage. I think is what Bob Marley, that was his wisdom he brought to the table. Because his heart was so big, he was able to see that bigger picture. Start the rally, don't be late. Now watch the bulls out on parade. Shout, yes, we can, and might as well round them up with a pocket full of shells. So what did Rage Against the Machine teach us? To be anti-authoritarian. Because you do what they tell you. Start the rally, don't. And this was also my Occupy feeling. Watch the bulls out on parade. Rage Against the Machine, which was bred on KRS-One, early hip-hop, which was very anti-authoritarian before it became all about the drip and image. You can see these younger generations following false leaders and false iterations of manhood. When I say false, I don't think those things hold up well in life. But let's see. Live what you believe, I'll live what I believe, and the truth will work itself out in the consequences of our actions, right? So, I like this poem. I think it captures a lot of wisdom. It captures autobiographically a good time in my life when I was healing myself from a lot of negativity I was reading by creating art. And that's the point of art itself, is to heal. So, this is a good one.